truth was just beginning.
January 17, 1945. The morning sun glints weakly off the restless Pacific waves. From the jagged cliffs, a Japanese captain peers through a pair of worn binoculars, his uniform damp with salt and sweat. Far below, the horizon is dotted with the dark silhouettes of landing craft, lumbering forward like an unstoppable tide. The rhythmic pounding of naval artillery reverberates through the air, a constant reminder that the sea itself has turned against them. On the beach, Marines disembark in tight formation, rifles ready, backpacks heavy with supplies. The sand erupts under shells and mortar fire, smoke curling into the pale sky. Tanks grind forward behind them, their treads tearing the earth, and in the distance transport ships disgorge more men, vehicles, and artillery.
Move up, keep low! Get to cover now! Go, go, keep moving!
The captain watches in silence, a cold knot forming in his stomach. "They bring the factories with them," he mutters, almost to himself. It is not just a battle unfolding, it is the full weight of American industry, manpower, and determination arriving on this narrow strip of sand. Every landing craft, every soldier, every barrel of ammunition tells a story of relentless preparation, of a nation mobilized for total war.
It cannot be true! How could we have fallen so far?
And now, it is here. The first shots have barely fallen. The storm is just beginning. By late 1944, the Pacific War had entered a decisive phase. The United States, having weathered the surprise of Pearl Harbor and pushed through Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and the Marianas, had begun a relentless island-hopping campaign designed to bring the war closer to the Japanese homeland. Every island captured, every airfield secured, and every naval base neutralized brought the Allies one step nearer to Japan's inner defensive perimeter. It was a war of attrition, of supply lines, and of industrial endurance. Each victory not measured merely in territory, but in the sheer ability to maintain the momentum. The Japanese, meanwhile, were preparing for a struggle that would test the limits of strategy and morale. Military planners understood that the defense of certain islands was not merely tactical, but symbolic. The islands along the Pacific perimeter were fortresses, transformed from mere dots on a map into lethal strongholds bristling with artillery, bunkers, and camouflaged machine gun nests. Commanders believed that by inflicting maximum casualties, they could slow the American advance and perhaps force a negotiated peace. One such island became the focal point of this strategy. Its volcanic cliffs and narrow beaches promised a natural advantage, a narrow choke point where attackers could be concentrated and destroyed. Intelligence reports indicated that thousands of Japanese defenders had been carefully positioned in fortified caves, underground tunnels, and elevated positions, with interlocking fields of fire covering every potential landing site. Mines were buried in the sand, anti-tank obstacles littered the terrain, and artillery hidden in natural gullies could rain destruction upon any approaching craft. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific, the United States began to marshal its forces. Carrier groups, battleships, and cruisers gathered in formation, projecting power across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Amphibious divisions trained for months in simulated landings, drilling until every movement was instinct. Supplies, munitions, and reinforcements were loaded meticulously. Every rifle, every shell, every tank accounted for. Logistical planning became an art form. It was a demonstration not just of military skill, but of industrial capacity. Factories in the United States worked around the clock, producing vehicles, weapons, and equipment at a scale that the Japanese could scarcely match. The contrast between the defenders and the attackers was stark. While Japanese troops relied on ingenuity, camouflage, and deep knowledge of the terrain, The Americans relied on overwhelming force and relentless preparation. Yet for all the disparity in numbers and material, the defenders remained resolute. Many were veterans of previous battles, hardened by years of combat and indoctrinated with the conviction that surrender was dishonorable. They would fight, knowing the odds were stacked against them, shaping a confrontation that would test both sides to the extreme. In this crucible, the stage was set. The impending landing was not merely an assault on an island. It was a collision of strategy, industry, and human endurance. The Japanese captain standing atop the cliffs, observing the horizon, was witnessing the culmination of years of planning and preparation. Each approaching landing craft carried with it not just soldiers, but the weight of a nation's industrial and logistical machinery. The beaches below were about to become a theater of unrelenting combat, where every tactical decision, every defensive emplacement, and every act of courage or desperation would determine the fate of hundreds of lives in a matter of hours. The island's volcanic sand, its steep ridges and hidden caves would not merely be terrain. They would become silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. And as the first wave of Marines approached, guided by maps, rehearsed drills, and the rhythm of naval bombardments, the Japanese defenders prepared for a fight that would soon engulf every inch of sand and stone. The weight of anticipation was palpable, a tense pause before the storm. It was in this tension, between preparation and action, that history waited. The world held its breath. And then, the landing began. The American planners approached the landing with lessons learned from bitter experience. Each island captured in the Pacific had revealed harsh truths. Dense jungle or volcanic terrain could conceal deadly ambushes. Lightly armored landing craft could be destroyed by even modest shore defenses. And the human cost of underestimating a determined enemy was staggering. Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, all had left indelible marks on both military doctrine and national consciousness.
Go, go, go! Keep low! Watch the incoming fire! Get that stretcher up here now!
Each casualty had been studied meticulously, feeding into the doctrine that would guide the next assault. For this operation, the force assembled was immense. Several Marine divisions, supported by Army units and coordinated with a formidable naval task force, prepared to execute a landing the likes of which the Pacific had rarely seen. Battleships and cruisers were arrayed offshore, their main guns poised to deliver precise bombardments.
Stand by to load! Send the next round! Clear the breach!
Aircraft carriers provided air cover, with squadrons of fighters and dive bombers ready to suppress Japanese positions and target artillery emplacements. Amphibious tanks, some modified for beach assault, were loaded alongside thousands of Marines. Every vessel, every crate, and every soldier was part of a complex choreography designed to overwhelm defenses before they could inflict catastrophic losses. Japanese intelligence had identified the approaching forces, but estimates often underestimated the scale and speed of American logistics. The defenders' resources were formidable in their own right. Well-trained infantry, artillery pieces hidden in reinforced bunkers, machine gun nests interwoven with natural terrain, and miles of barbed wire and minefields. Engineers had sculpted caves and tunnels into the volcanic rock, creating interconnected positions that allowed defenders to move unseen, emerge unexpectedly, and retreat safely when necessary. Ammunition stockpiles were carefully hidden, and provisions ensured that defenders could hold out under siege conditions for extended periods. Yet despite this meticulous preparation, the Japanese faced an overwhelming challenge. The Americans had industrial power on their side, a relentless tide of reinforcements and supplies capable of replacing losses faster than the defenders could inflict them. Ships could unload in hours what had taken months to gather. Artillery shells rained down in sustained barrages, often neutralizing strong points before Marines even reached the sand. And as the fleet maintained constant communication with forward observers and aircraft, the defenders were forced to anticipate attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. The landing craft themselves represented a technological evolution. Higgins boats, LVT amphibious vehicles, and specialized engineer units allowed troops to cross reefs, surf, and sand under fire. Tanks designed for amphibious assault could provide covering fire as infantry disembarked, suppressing machine gun nests and clearing paths through obstacles. Artillery from ships could strike deep into the island, flattening bunkers or cutting off reinforcements. Every piece of equipment had been designed or adapted to solve problems identified in previous battles. On the Japanese side, the defenders relied on intimate knowledge of the terrain. High ground was fortified with hidden emplacements, slopes were mined, and caves were rigged to allow small units to ambush advancing forces repeatedly. They had endured months of shortages and relentless Allied pressure, yet morale, discipline, and training made them resilient. Every officer and soldier understood that retreat was rarely an option. Surrender was culturally and strategically discouraged. The defenders' planning emphasized inflicting maximum casualties while conserving forces, a deadly balance between aggression and survival. The convergence of these factors created a perfect storm. The Americans brought overwhelming firepower, meticulous planning, and industrial capacity. The Japanese brought skill, preparation, and resolve. Both sides understood the stakes. For the Americans, a decisive victory would bring them closer to Japan's inner defensive perimeter and airfields vital for strategic bombing campaigns. For the Japanese, every delay, every loss inflicted on the enemy was a step toward defending the homeland, buying time, and demonstrating the cost of invasion. By the time the first wave of landing craft approached the beaches, the island had been transformed into a crucible of preparation, strategy, and expectation. Observation posts scanned the horizon. Every gun crew, officer, and soldier waited in tense anticipation. The sea, once a neutral expanse, had become a stage where industrial power, military skill, and human endurance would collide in a matter of hours. And so, as dawn broke over the horizon, the Marines' shadows stretched across the surf. The guns thundered. The island held its breath. For the Marines wading through the surf, the landing was more than a military operation. It was an ordeal of the senses, a baptism by fire.
Move up! Keep moving! Watch the left flank! Get to the dunes!
The Pacific dawn was bright but cold, the sand beneath their boots unstable, shifting with every step. Water splashed over helmets and rifles, mixing with the salt, sweat, and smoke from naval bombardments. The roar of artillery created a constant vibration through the ground, a relentless percussion that left little room for thought beyond the next step. Some soldiers moved with practiced precision, drilled repeatedly for this exact moment. Others stumbled, overwhelmed by the cacophony of gunfire, explosions, and the sheer scale of the operation. Behind each face was a story. Volunteers from small towns, conscripts pulled from factories, young men barely out of adolescence, yet all were bound by the same mission. Fear was omnipresent, but so too was determination. Survival depended on instinct, training, and the soldier beside you. And as they reached the sand, each Marine understood that every foot gained would come at a human cost, shaping memories and legacies long before the battle ended. Commanders on both sides faced choices that would ripple across the battlefield. On the American side, division commanders coordinated landing waves, artillery schedules, and air support with meticulous timing. Decisions were made in real time, whether to push forward along one beach sector or redirect forces under fire, whether to commit reserve units to exploit a breach or hold them back for reinforcement. The chain of command, honed through months of planning and prior combat experience, balanced risk and opportunity. One miscalculation could result in hundreds of casualties, stalled momentum, or loss of critical ground. Japanese officers observing from bunkers or cliffside posts made decisions of equal weight. They had prepared defensive positions with care, but now they had to adapt. Where should reserves be committed? Which artillery positions could be sacrificed to preserve the bulk of their force? Every decision was a calculation under pressure, with the knowledge that misjudgment could open the door to the Americans' industrial advantage. For many, the weight of tradition and honor intensified the pressure. Defense was not merely tactical, it was moral. The terrain dictated tactics. The beaches were narrow, dotted with coral, rocks, and hidden obstacles designed to trap or slow advancing troops. Japanese fire was layered. Machine guns interlaced with artillery fire created zones of overlapping danger. Pre-landing bombardments had softened some positions, But experience from previous battles had shown that fortified caves and tunnels could survive even the heaviest shelling. Marines needed to neutralize these positions swiftly to avoid being pinned on the sand. Small unit tactics became essential. Fire teams coordinated suppressive fire, flanking maneuvers, and demolition efforts against bunkers. LVTS and amphibious tanks provided mobile cover, bridging gaps in firepower and terrain. Every movement required discipline, coordination, and courage. The success of the landing was a mosaic of thousands of individual decisions executed in concert, each Marine's action a vital piece of the broader strategy. From the Japanese vantage point, the arrival of each landing craft was a mixture of inevitability and shock. The scale of the operation was staggering. Hundreds of vessels, thousands of soldiers, tanks and artillery streaming ashore in precise waves. Yet the defenders were trained to observe, adapt, and exploit every opportunity. Snipers selected targets, artillery crews recalibrated to strike advancing formations, and tunnel networks allowed sudden counterattacks that appeared from nowhere. The psychological dimension was significant. For many Japanese soldiers, the realization that the Americans brought not just men, but the full weight of industrial capacity, equipment, vehicles, and endless ammunition, was both sobering and terrifying. It was a reminder that this battle was not merely tactical, but strategic. Each Marine on the sand represented the output of an entire nation's factories, a relentless production line of war material that could not be easily stopped. As the morning unfolded, the interplay of human courage, leadership, tactics, and observation would determine who gained ground and who would be forced into retreat. Technology, logistics, and the broader industrial effort had set the stage, but it was these angles, human, tactical, and leadership, that shaped the immediate reality of combat. Technology played a defining role in the landing's outcome. American forces relied on specialized equipment developed through years of trial and error across the Pacific. Amphibious tanks, able to traverse surf and soft sand, provided critical cover for disembarking troops. Higgins boats, designed to land dozens of Marines directly onto the beach, allowed rapid deployment and minimized exposure to fire from fortified positions. Artillery pieces, both naval and ground-based, unleashed barrages calculated with precision, flattening enemy strongpoints and clearing lanes for infantry. Even small innovations, a flamethrower, demolition charge, or grenade launcher, could turn the tide in a localized engagement, destroying caves, bunkers, or machine gun nests that had proven deadly in prior battles. Japanese forces had adapted with ingenuity. Bunker designs incorporated thick concrete reinforced with steel, often camouflaged to blend into natural cliffs or dunes. Tunnels allowed movement unseen, enabling defenders to emerge unexpectedly, counterattack, or retreat without exposure. Mortars and artillery were placed in concealed positions, their trajectories calculated to exploit gaps in naval bombardment. While lacking the sheer volume of American production, Japanese technology was effective when paired with terrain knowledge and tactical foresight. The sheer scale of logistics underscored the Americans' advantage. Every rifle, shell, and ration delivered to the beachhead represented a chain of production stretching from factories thousands of miles away. Supply ships, floating depots, and meticulously timed convoys ensured that losses could be rapidly replaced. Fuel, ammunition, and medical supplies flowed continuously, enabling sustained assaults that would have been impossible for a nation without industrial depth. Japanese logistics, by contrast, were constrained. Island defenses relied on pre-positioned stockpiles, often limited in quantity and vulnerable to naval bombardment. Resupply by submarine or aircraft was sporadic and perilous. Each round of ammunition expended was a critical decision. Each casualty added pressure to stretched medical resources. The difference in logistics was a constant factor in the psychological and tactical dynamics of the battle. Both sides faced profound moral challenges. Marines endured the fear of death, witnessing comrades fall mere meters away, yet pressed forward under relentless fire. Discipline and camaraderie were essential, each man relying on his squad, platoon, and company for survival. Acts of extraordinary bravery, charging a machine gun nest alone, rescuing wounded under fire, were repeated countless times, shaping the narrative of courage that would endure long after the battle. For Japanese defenders, moral resolve was intertwined with duty and culture. Surrender was dishonorable, so the only acceptable option was defense to the last man. Even when facing overwhelming odds, soldiers maintained positions, counterattacked strategically, and inflicted casualties on a superior force. The moral imperative to defend homeland and honor created a deadly tension. Tactical decisions were inseparable from cultural expectations, turning each defensive action into both a military and ethical statement. From elevated observation posts, Japanese officers and enlisted men alike faced an uncomfortable reality. The Americans had brought not just men, but the full weight of industrial might. Landing craft were endless, tanks and artillery followed closely, and naval gunfire continually reshaped the battlefield. Even the most carefully prepared defenses were tested to their limits. Observers noted the precision and coordination of the landing waves, the integration of air support, and the effectiveness of pre-landing bombardments. Some Japanese commanders recognized the strategic calculus. Each Marine represented not only a soldier, but the logistical power of the United States. It was this realization that prompted the remark immortalized by one captain: "They bring the factories with them." The statement captured both awe and foreboding, a recognition that no single island, no single defense, could fully halt a nation mobilized at industrial scale. Technology, logistics, and morale converged on the beachhead. Every piece of equipment, every resupply, and every courageous action shaped the ebb and flow of combat. As the morning progressed, the interplay of these factors would culminate in moments of intense confrontation. The first turning points of the battle. The first wave struck the beach with a roar. Landing craft crested the waves, tossing Marines into chest-deep surf. Shells from naval artillery burst overhead, sending sprays of sand and shrapnel into the surf. Smoke and mist hung low, obscuring the shoreline, turning each step forward into a gamble. Machine guns from hidden bunkers spat fire with lethal accuracy, cutting through the water and sand. Yet the Marines pressed forward, instinct and training guiding them across the treacherous terrain. Amid the chaos, small unit leadership became crucial. Fire teams advanced in staggered formations, providing covering fire for one another. Engineers dashed forward to remove mines and obstacles, often under direct fire. Amphibious tanks moved alongside infantry, their mounted guns suppressing enemy nests, while crews braved the surf, vulnerable to enemy bullets and the pounding surf itself. Every foot gained required coordination, courage, and the willingness to absorb losses for the sake of momentum. On higher ground, Japanese defenders directed fire with precision. Officers shouted orders, adjusting fields of fire as Marines sought cover behind sand dunes and debris. Mortars lobbed shells into the landing areas, while snipers targeted exposed leaders, hoping to disrupt command and slow the advance. Every defensive measure was designed to maximize casualties while buying time for reinforcements to counterattack. Yet the American assault had layers. Airstrikes from carrier-based planes strafed the cliffs and ridges, temporarily suppressing artillery and machine guns. Naval bombardments targeted known strongpoints, cratering bunkers and flattening barbed wire obstacles. Coordinated with infantry movements, these attacks created fleeting windows of opportunity, allowing Marines to move forward despite the deadly fire raining down upon them. The human dimension of the battle became apparent in these moments. Individual acts, throwing a grenade into a hidden bunker, dragging a wounded comrade to safety, or charging an enemy nest alone, shaped the course of the landing in microcosm. Each act, though small in isolation, accumulated to create the momentum necessary to secure footholds on the beach. Observers on both sides witnessed courage and determination unfolding in real time, knowing that survival and control of the terrain depended on these split-second decisions. The turning point in this initial phase was often a matter of terrain. Certain ridges and dune lines, once captured, allowed the Marines to establish firing positions that suppressed Japanese defenses further down the beach. Conversely, failure to take a critical point could funnel troops into kill zones, increasing casualties and threatening the landing's success. Commanders on both sides moved constantly, adapting strategies in response to gains and losses. Every observation post, every machine gun nest, and every artillery emplacement became part of a complex chessboard where mistakes were lethal. Despite the intensity, the Americans' numerical and technological advantage began to show. Waves of reinforcements arrived with precision, tanks continued to roll onto the sand, and artillery and naval fire adjusted in real time to neutralize emerging threats.
Fire mission! Fire mission! Target coordinates are grid 054, adjust left 20. Heavy enemy presence on the ridge.
The Japanese defenders, resolute and well-prepared, were forced to make choices. Which positions could be held, which must be sacrificed, and how best to delay the overwhelming force before them. By the mid-morning hours, the beachhead began to solidify. Pockets of resistance remained fierce and deadly, but the Americans had established critical footholds. Commanders coordinated the consolidation of gains with the arrival of subsequent waves, bringing in heavier weapons and additional troops. The island's landscape, once a defensive advantage for the Japanese, was gradually being dominated by Marines pushing inland, exploiting every tactical opening provided by naval and air support. The clash of human determination, strategy, and technology set the stage for the next phase. While the first wave had gained the beach, the battle was far from decided. The defenders had not yet exhausted their options, and the Americans had yet to fully leverage the industrial and logistical power that had brought them here. As the morning unfolded into midday, the battle shifted from the surf to the volcanic ridges and narrow passes beyond the beach. Marines pressed inland, moving through smoke-choked sand and rubble-strewn paths, while Japanese defenders used the terrain to maximum effect. Hidden caves, reinforced bunkers, and steep ridges allowed defenders to fire from unexpected angles, forcing attackers into deadly crossfires. Every step forward demanded vigilance, courage, and tactical precision. The inland struggle revealed the full brutality of the engagement. Mortar rounds exploded among advancing units, snipers picked off exposed leaders, and booby traps claimed both Marines and engineers alike. The Japanese defenders had anticipated the landing's inland advance, creating interlocking fields of fire that funneled Marines into pre-selected kill zones.
All right, men, hit the beach! Let's go, let's go! Move out!
Yet the Americans, trained to exploit small tactical advantages, adapted quickly. Fire teams flanked positions, coordinated with tanks and flamethrower units, and systematically cleared bunkers. The battle became a series of small, intense engagements, each one shaping the control of the terrain. Critical positions determined the pace of the assault. Ridgelines overlooking the beach were the first objective. Holding them allowed artillery observers to adjust fire, suppressing remaining enemy strongpoints. Capturing fortified caves required combined arms, Marines, engineers, flamethrowers, and explosives working in precise concert. Every success was measured not only in ground gained, but in the opportunity it created for subsequent waves, securing supply lines and enabling reinforcements to reach forward positions. The psychological toll was immense. Marines faced relentless fire while carrying the weight of packs, weapons, and the knowledge that retreat was impossible under pressure. Exhaustion set in, yet discipline and training sustained them. For Japanese defenders, the realization that their positions were gradually being overtaken by wave after wave of well-supported troops created both urgency and despair. Counterattacks were launched from tunnels and high ground, yet each failed attempt further weakened their defensive cohesion. By late afternoon, the industrial advantage of the Americans became undeniable. Supply lines delivered fresh ammunition, medical aid, and reinforcements with remarkable efficiency. Tanks, artillery, and mortars were repositioned as needed, neutralizing pockets of resistance that might have otherwise stalled the advance. The defenders' limited resources, once carefully rationed, began to dwindle under the relentless pressure of sustained assaults. Each fallen bunker, each captured ridge, demonstrated the overwhelming synergy of manpower, technology, and logistics.
From the home front piers, across the vast Pacific to the front lines, a relentless tide of steel, medicine, and ammunition.
Key leadership decisions during this phase proved decisive. American commanders coordinated artillery, naval fire, and air support to create windows of opportunity for infantry advances. Field officers made rapid judgments about which sectors to reinforce, which to exploit, and how to minimize exposure while maximizing territorial gains. Japanese officers, often trapped in compromised positions, directed small unit counterattacks, attempting to delay the advance and inflict maximum casualties before being forced to withdraw or retreat underground. By evening, the balance had clearly shifted. The beachhead was secure, Inland positions were being consolidated, and Japanese defensive lines were beginning to fragment. Remaining pockets of resistance remained deadly, yet the momentum had passed irrevocably to the Americans. What had begun as a chaotic, uncertain landing had evolved into a structured, grinding advance. The combination of human courage, precise leadership, technological innovation, and relentless logistical support had turned the tide. The first full day of fighting concluded with Marines entrenched in newly captured positions, artillery observers adjusting fire for the next day, and engineers preparing routes for further inland operations. Japanese defenders, though not defeated, were now reacting to the Americans' pace, rather than dictating it. The island, once a formidable bastion of defense, was beginning to fall under the weight of preparation, industrial capacity, and human endurance. The first day of the landing left the island transformed. The beaches, once unbroken and defended, were now scarred with craters, overturned landing craft, and the debris of artillery fire. Smoke hung low over the sand, curling from destroyed bunkers and scorched vegetation. Casualties were heavy on both sides.
Get up! We're moving! Let's go! Let's go!
Marines counted the dead and wounded, but the relentless flow of reinforcements and medical support allowed operations to continue. Japanese defenders, too, suffered severely, their positions destroyed or abandoned, their resources depleted, and their morale strained by the unyielding assault. Strategically, the landing marked a turning point in the broader campaign. Securing the beachhead allowed the Americans to establish supply depots, forward artillery positions, and observation posts critical for continued inland advances. The capture of these points enabled the projection of firepower deeper into the island, neutralizing remaining strongpoints and disrupting Japanese coordination. Naval and air superiority ensured that supply lines remained secure, while reinforcements and heavy equipment could be brought ashore with minimal interruption. The operation demonstrated that industrial power, combined with meticulous planning and disciplined execution, could overwhelm even the most prepared defenses. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. For the Marines, survival through the first waves, coupled with successful advancement inland, reinforced confidence in training, leadership, and technology. Units bonded through shared experience, and individual acts of valor became part of a collective narrative that would define the campaign. Meanwhile, Japanese commanders observed the unceasing arrival of troops, artillery, and supplies with a mix of admiration and dread. The realization that the enemy could replace losses almost instantly, every man, every weapon, every shell, was a sobering acknowledgment of the industrial gulf between the two forces. Reports from forward observers painted a stark picture of the battle's intensity. Naval officers recorded the destruction of enemy emplacements, while infantry units described the chaotic scenes on the beach. Wounded being carried through smoke and fire, tanks bogged down in sand, and small unit firefights erupting in bunkers and caves. Communication logs detailed adjustments in fire support, the arrival of reinforcements, and the continual reorganization of units under duress. On both sides, the sheer scale of coordination, adaptation, and endurance highlighted the human and logistical complexity of modern warfare.
Sector 2 is compromised. Hold the line.
Sir, we are taking heavy casualties on the ridge.
All units, push forward now.
Amid the carnage, the island's terrain itself bore silent witness. Craters, demolished bunkers, and scorched earth testified to the power of combined arms. Artillery, naval bombardment, airstrikes, and infantry assaults working in synchrony. The first day's success, however, did not signify the end of combat. Pockets of resistance remained, and the island's defenders retained knowledge of hidden tunnels, caves, and ridges that could be leveraged for counterattacks. Yet the momentum had decisively shifted. The Americans held the initiative, and each subsequent wave could build upon the gains achieved in the morning hours. The aftermath of the landing also foreshadowed the broader campaign's trajectory. Commanders and strategists on both sides would analyze the engagement for lessons in coordination, morale, and technology. For the Americans, it reinforced the effectiveness of combined arms and the critical role of logistics and industrial capacity. For the Japanese, it emphasized the limits of even the most determined defense when confronted with an opponent able to sustain relentless assaults. The human dimension, the courage, endurance, and sacrifice witnessed, left an indelible mark on the participants. Survivors carried memories of the first landing wave, the roar of artillery, the screams and shouts amid smoke and debris. Veterans would later recount how every small action, throwing a grenade, advancing under fire, rescuing a comrade, was a thread in the larger tapestry of victory or survival. The experiences of this day would ripple through history, shaping perceptions of courage, preparation, and the scale of industrialized warfare. By the end of the first 48 hours, the full scale of the landing's consequences had become clear. American forces had secured a substantial portion of the beachhead and key inland positions, allowing continued reinforcement and supply. Naval and air superiority ensured that every critical logistical requirement, from ammunition and fuel to medical evacuation, could be maintained without interruption. The coordination between infantry, armor, artillery, and naval bombardment had demonstrated the overwhelming effect of combined arms in a modern amphibious operation. Casualty figures reflected both the ferocity of the defenders and the success of the American assault. Thousands of Japanese defenders had fallen in the initial landings, their fortifications destroyed or abandoned, while survivors retreated into caves, tunnels, and secondary defensive lines. On the American side, losses were heavy but sustainable, cushioned by the continuous flow of reinforcements and resupply. Each loss underscored the human cost of victory, yet each advance reinforced the effectiveness of meticulous planning, technological support, and sheer manpower. Strategically, the landing cemented American control over critical approaches to the island. Captured ridges and observation posts allowed forward artillery observers to direct fire with devastating accuracy, neutralizing remaining pockets of resistance. The success of the initial assault provided a template for subsequent operations across the Pacific. Overwhelming force, precise coordination, and logistical superiority could overcome even the most prepared and determined defenses. Psychologically, the impact on both sides was profound. For the American troops, the victory validated training, leadership, and technology. Soldiers gained confidence not only in their own units, but in the broader machinery of war that supported them. Veterans of the landing would recall the relentless advance, the courage of their comrades, and the coordination that made the seemingly impossible possible. For the Japanese defenders, the realization that even fortified positions could be systematically dismantled by a well-prepared and technologically superior force weighed heavily. Officers and soldiers alike confronted the stark reality. The industrial capacity and logistical depth of the United States could not easily be matched or countered in direct confrontation. The battle also influenced subsequent operational planning on both sides. American commanders analyzed successes and setbacks, adjusting future amphibious operations for efficiency, safety, and speed. Lessons in coordination between naval bombardment, air support, and infantry assault informed strategies for Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and other critical engagements. Japanese strategists, recognizing the limitations of conventional defense against such overwhelming force, increasingly relied on cave networks, kamikaze tactics, and asymmetric strategies designed to delay and attrite rather than outright repel American advances. Beyond the tactical and strategic effects, the landing reinforced the broader narrative of industrialized warfare. Every Marine, every shell, every tank, and every landing craft embodied the capacity of a nation to translate industrial output into battlefield success. The Japanese captain's observation, "They bring the factories with them," was not mere hyperbole. It captured a reality that would resonate throughout the Pacific campaign. The convergence of industry, technology, and human determination was a defining feature of modern warfare, a lesson evident not only on this island, but across theaters of conflict worldwide. As night fell over the beachhead, the island bore the scars of the assault. Craters, demolished bunkers, and flattened vegetation were silent testimony to the first hours of the landing. Yet even amid devastation, the story of human endurance, strategic execution, and technological application emerged clearly. The immediate battle had ended, but the implications, both for those on the island and for the course of the Pacific War, were only beginning to unfold. The island, scarred and smoldering, had borne witness to the collision of human courage, meticulous planning, and industrial power. The first landing waves, the thunder of naval guns, and the relentless advance inland were not just tactical events, they were manifestations of a modern war fought on a scale previously unimaginable. The Americans had demonstrated that preparation, coordination, and the capacity to sustain operations could overcome even the most determined defenses. Yet amid the machinery of war, the human element remained central. Every soldier on both sides confronted fear, endurance, and choice. Marines carried comrades across fire-swept sand. Engineers dismantled obstacles under withering fire, and Japanese defenders held positions with disciplined resolve, knowing the odds were against them. Courage and determination were not abstract ideals. They were lived, measured in heartbeats, steps, and decisions made under the weight of imminent danger. The remark of the Japanese captain, "They bring the factories with them," echoed beyond that single battle. It captured the essence of industrialized warfare, that nations, through production, organization, and relentless logistics, could project power far beyond the immediate battlefield. It was a reminder that wars are fought not only with weapons and tactics, but with the full mobilization of a society's resources, technology, and collective will. In the end, the landing was more than a military success. It was a testament to the convergence of strategy, technology, and human endurance. It demonstrated how preparation and courage could shape history, how industrial might could meet human resolve, and how every individual act, small or large, contributed to the unfolding story of a battle that would reverberate far beyond the sand and cliffs of a single island. As night settled over the devastated shoreline, the echoes of gunfire faded, leaving a quiet testament to the price of war and the resilience of those who faced it. The island, the soldiers, and the machines of war had been transformed forever, leaving lessons in courage, strategy, and the staggering scale of modern conflict, lessons that history would carry forward long after the sand had settled.
They brought the factories with them, but it was the hearts of men that paid the price.